What's up, fight fans? This is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunch Boxing News, and I got some new news for you concerning Dillian Whyte, Dereck Chisora. They just had the press conference. I was just checking out the press conference, the whole thing. I took time to listen to all the factors, all the promoters, and actually, the ironic thing is David Haye is actually in Dereck Chisora's corner in forms of management and training, and I just thought that was so ironic, man, because, David Haye was that same dude that was at his press conference at one of his fights and punched him. David Haye, I'm going to kill you. I am literally going to kill you, David Haye, and that was a spectacle of what David did. But now, he is there. These guys are on the same side. Dillian Whyte is a character, man. You know what I mean? It's going to be a good fight. I did take time to look at the first fight, and the first fight was close. It was close. A lot of people think Dereck Chisora beat Dillian Whyte. So, I mean, it makes sense on a rivalry level, but in the overall package, it's not really it's not the ideal fight. Okay. I believe that, this fight is a good fight. Like Eddie Hearn said, this is like a Christmas present to the UK fans, not a worldwide thing necessarily, but it is a good thing for the fans of the UK because, these are two British fighters, and supposedly the winner will get an Anthony Joshua fight. Well, that's cool and all, but then it's too much like you're fighting only with British fighters. If they'd have threw Dominic Breazeale in there or Luis Ortiz in there in the mix, that would be a lot better. You know what I mean? That because it just seems like to me, it's like all like the heavyweight division after you guys signed Ortiz, Eddie Hearn signed Ortiz, it seems like it's just, I expect to see a good fight from Luis Ortiz. You know what I mean? I know he just resorted to the fight to fight on the undercard of Wilder. I know he's on that undercard, and I will cover that later. But, concerning this fight, people were pretty much composed. I think Don Charles kind of, threw some shade in there at Dillian Whyte, saying, you come from, a culture of unclass, and Dillian Whyte was like, look, he laughed it off. He was like, look, let's wrap this up. You know what I mean? Because I know what he was trying to do, with that. Because, he was like, oh, you remember what you said. You remember, the compassion. You remember the compassion on fight night. You just remember those words. They're like, I said those words. I said those words. You remember those words. Okay, just leave it at that then. You know what I mean? So people were trying to get their point across. The fight's been made. It will be a good fight though, because again, the UK fans, fighters that fight each other in the UK, it's more balls to the wall. It's just a different energy there in the UK, and it's a fan friendly fight. So you're definitely up for a treat. You're in for a treat rather, seeing these two guys get into the ring. We'll see what David Haye can teach Dereck Chisora. I'm interested in seeing that, what he has to bring to the table versus Dillian Whyte always comes to fight. You know what I mean? So we just got to see what these guys do, and they said, this is what gets me though. If a lot of guys want if a lot of guys think that Dillian Whyte lost to Dereck Chisora, well, I don't see what else he could bring new to the table, unless there's a knockout. You know what I'm saying? Because to me, Dillian Whyte is definitely the fan favorite. He's the favorite guy. You know what I mean? He's the A side in this situation. He's a guy that's expected to win because he's the guy on the rise. Dereck Chisora is fighting for what he's a recovering fighter that, that lost, a few times, and, he was expected to be beaten by Takam, but he beat Takam. And that's why he's here in this particular situation today, which, hey, which is great for him. You know what I mean? But is it really great for the sport overall? You know, that's the question you ask yourself. Sure, it's going to be a good fight. It's a good fight, but it seems like to me it's a good substitute fight. But this substitute fight was, you know, pushed to the main media, you know, because if Ortiz's name was kept popping up and Dillian Whyte was like, okay, hey, you know, what do you know, like, hey, I'm going to fight the old man. Then the old man called you out. Then all of a sudden there's no fight. So, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, this fight looks good. This fight looks really good on paper. These guys had, you know, a good fight. And I do think it is a reckoning, though. I think these guys have a lot to prove. I think Dillian Whyte has to prove that, hey, I beat Dereck Chisora convincingly. You know what I mean? And Dereck Chisora has to do a little bit more than what he's already done in the first fight because a lot of people thought he won too. You know what I mean? So we got to look at that, you know, but it was interesting. It was entertaining. The face-off was really respectful because I thought, you know, Dereck Chisora was going to throw a chair or something like he normally does when he gets pissed off and loses his cool and gets all unglued. So, you know what I mean? He didn't do that. You know, he kind of kept his distance. You know, they wouldn't nose to nose, you know, or face to face to face. They were more like kind of reserved back. They had a little space between them, you know, and they shook hands. So I was like, oh, okay, you know, and it seems like to me, Dereck Chisora is kind of maturing as a fighter too. I got to add that in because, you know, again, look what he's done in the past. You know, his brawls with David Haye and throwing chairs and losing his cool, spitting in, you know, Klitschko's face. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's one of those things, you know, where, you know, in this particular fight, he looks more reserved. You know, he looked, you know, like Don Charles said, you know, conduct, you know, he was showing conduct. So he's conducting himself accordingly, you know, respectfully. So that's cool. But anyway, that's just me wrapping it up on the press conference. You know, you UK fans, for you guys have a treat coming on December 2nd. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch. Peace.